How's it going, everyone? Thank you for joining me for another Photoshop tutorial here at Blended Graphics. And in today's episode, we are going to take this outdoor environment scene and place it inside of a bedroom and kind of combine these two elements into one fun effect. I think you're gonna like this episode, and I really enjoyed this composition, how it turned out, and I'm excited to share it with you in my process into what that looks like. So let's jump right into this and let's get started. Alright, so here we are with our blank canvas. We're going to turn on our main couple here we're going to use. And the first thing I want to do is drag in a guide from the top. So let's just go ahead and drag this down from the top, make sure that your rulers are selected. And you can see that it's a little crooked, so we're going to hit Command or Control T just to transform this, and we're going to rotate this slightly so it looks a bit more leveled off. So something like this looks really nice. Okay, so we can get rid of that guide. And we're going to make a copy of this by pressing Ctrl or Command J just so we can always have a nice backup to work with. And the first thing that we're going to do here is with this couple, we just want to extract them from the background. So let's just go ahead and quickly use the pen tool, and I'm going to speed through this real fast because, we don't really need to see all of this. But all I'm doing is just going to extract them from the background. I'm going to use some of the water. So in a second here, we're going to put this in a room so you can kind of start to build that environment. So just a couple more seconds with this, and then we'll get rolling here. Alright, so we're going to right click, make a selection, hit OK, and then we're going to hit that layer mask option so we can have that by themselves. Alright, so here's the room that I'm using just to kind of help us out a little bit in terms of perspective. Now, I've already set my guides up ahead of time, but I'm just kind of showing you the process as to how I did this. So I'm using this as a little template here. So I'm just holding down the Control Command and clicking on that nodule to compress that a bit. And then we're going to right click and change the perspective on this. So something like this, we'll hit that check mark, and then we want to expand this all the way up and just expand this so that way it fills the whole canvas. And we're just going to move this over so it's a bit more straight. Alright, so that looks nice. We'll hit that check mark or hit enter. And we'll bring our couple back in, and obviously now you can see that we're going to have to, again, increase the size of these guys so it looks realistic and that they fit the right size and proportion to the room here. So something like this. And I'm trying to match that perspective of where the water is with the ground. That's a big thing. So you can see here our horizon line is essentially right around this area here, and I kind of want to line that up with the baseboards of this room. So what I want to do is maybe just go ahead and just take this background here, and we're just going to nudge this down ever so slightly, just something like that. Alright, so that looks better. And then we can get rid of this guide here. And I'm actually going to nudge this over to the right so that way that back crease of the wall isn't directly behind the guy. So I want that a little bit off-centered. And then what we're going to do is start our guide process. So let's turn our couple off, and I'm just using the pen tool right now. And we're going to right click, and then what we are looking for is stroke path. Let's make sure that we're on a new layer first, and then we can right click, stroke path, hit OK. And then we're going to do the same thing for the top up here. So we'll start at this crease, just where the wall meets the ceiling. And we'll click a couple of times. Same thing, we'll right click, and let's make sure that we're not doing a selection. Let's try that one more time. Right click, and let's go to stroke path. Okay, so something like that looks really nice. However, what I want to make as an adjustment is I just want the walls to be just a little bit larger, just for personal preference. So I'm just eyeballing this, and I'm just going to make a new selection here and a new selection here. And then we're going to do the same thing. Let's just right click right about here, and then we're going to stroke the path. So this is pretty much what I want. And you're going to see here, I already do have my guides in place like I told you before. I did set this up ahead of time to make sure it's exactly the way I want it. So this is what I have, and this is what we're going to work with going on into this picture. Alright, so at this point now, what we can do is just turn on our couple once more, and we're just going to fit them into this environment here. So I'm nudging them down a little bit, and at this point we're just kind of playing around with it just to kind of feel like a personal preference as to where I want these guys. Again, I want to make sure that the crease is not directly behind our guy. So something like that. Alright, that looks nice. And let's go ahead and now turn on our background scene, which is going to be the scene that's going to be on our walls and ceilings. So we're going to crank this up quite a bit. Let's scale this up all the way. And we're just going to move this over to a nice part of the background here. Something like this. Alright, so I think we'll work with this. And I'm going to bring in a guide and just place that right on the crease here of the wall. And then what we're going to do is use the rectangular marquee selection tool, create a copy of this, and press Command J to create just a copy of that side. We'll call it the left side. And we can convert that to a smart object, and we're going to do the same thing with the right side. I just want to isolate the two walls together and have them on their own individual layers. Alright, so now that we have both of these together, what we're going to do, and let's go ahead and start with the left wall here. So let's click on that layer, and we're going to right click and then go to perspective here after we transformed. And then we're just going to change the perspective just a little bit so it looks like it folds alongside this wall here. So something like that. And we're going to do the same thing, of course, with the right side now. So I'll go back to our perspective here. There we go. And then just on this bottom anchor, let's just drag that down a little bit so it folds a little bit better and more accurately with our wall. Okay. So I think I like this. We'll just hit enter or click on that check mark. And what I want to do though is it's still kind of small. So I want to just fill up the walls just a bit more. So let's just zoom in here. And we're just going to expand this just a little bit more. Just something like this. And we're going to do the same thing with the left side, obviously, because now we've got to match that middle crease. We want to make sure that that lines up accurately. Alright, so something right around here. And we can just kind of alter this right side just a little bit more. Alright, and the next on the list, we're going to make a copy of both the left and right sides of the walls, and then we're going to right click and convert that to a smart object so it's in one layer. And now we need to get this ceiling underway. So we're going to go back to our pen tool and just create a selection of this top part, and then we want to go ahead and add the layer mask. And since we have that isolated into a smart object here, we're going to transform this and right click, and let's go back to perspective so that way we can make this ceiling in the sky just more flat, like it is actually on the ceiling. So something like this, we stretch that out quite a bit, and we can just nudge this over a little bit, ever so slightly. And obviously you can see that we have some of that picture just bleeding over the walls, so we need to take care of that real quick, and we're just gonna erase that on the layer mask itself. And we can even blend the sides a little bit as well. Something like this. I think that'll look like a nice little transition there. Alright, and then we're going to move on to what I think is going to be the most annoying part of this whole composition, and that's the floor. So first let's get rid of our couple here, and I'm going to load a selection of just the left side and just make a copy of that selection. Alright, something like that. And on a new layer, we're going to go to filter and go to vanishing point. And in vanishing point here, we're just going to make a little grid, and this is going to help us get that image in perspective. So let's just stretch this out and we'll bring this up a little bit. So just take some time playing around with this, and then you can hit Command V whenever you're ready to load in that image that you made a copy of. And we're going to just move this around somewhere right around here. It doesn't have to be perfect because we'll just play around with that a little more in just a second here, but let's just hit OK. And I want to get rid of this bottom on both sides here. Okay, so now we've got this image back in. So honestly, at this point, it just takes a lot of time of just kind of playing around with some of these corners, getting the right perspective on here, and just really just kind of playing around with it. I made a couple of copies just to help us out in this department a little bit, and then we can just blend in these images together so that it looks like the green parts and the yellow trees are, it's very cohesive as it bends onto the floor. So just like we did on the left side there, we're going to have to do the same thing with the right side. But before we do that, I'm looking at that left tree on the left side there, and I just want to maybe distort this perspective just a little bit, make it look more flushed with the ground. So let's just bring that down, and then we can raise this up. There we go. That looks a little bit more flat for me. And then we can just kind of paint back some of this of what we would like to have back in, but yeah, that looks good. Our couple is going to be taking care of a lot of this, so don't be too worried about it if you don't see everything, but that should be fine. Now I'm just being picky. Alright, so that looks good. All right, our couple is back in, and like I said, we're gonna do the same thing with the right side, but I'm not gonna show you that process since I just showed you the left. Let's just skip over that, and now you can see how that is taken care of. What we can do is just fill the rest of this ground with the water. So I'm gonna go back to our layer mask of our couple and just paint white and bring that back in, and we can fill this whole ground in, to be honest. Don't worry too much because we are going to blend this together just a little bit more, but just for right now, we're just kind of seeing how things look. And this is looking really nice. Okay, so the next line of business is we need to make that sky at the bottom for reflection. So I've just made a copy of it and we just flipped it vertically, and we're gonna put this underneath those ground layers there, something like this. And then we just wanna blend these images together so it just looks a little bit more cohesive. We're not paying too much attention because obviously we've got a lot going on with the boat in the water, so we just want it to look halfway decent for us. Alright, on top of this, we are going to throw a solid color adjustment layer. Let's sample one of these water tones on our original background image, so something like that. And I just want this to stick only to this bottom, so we're going to use the pen tool just to create a selection of this and fill that in with white. Alright, perfect. And then we can just go ahead and come in here and just kind of tweak the colors ever so slightly and lower the opacity on this. We don't want it to be a solid blue tone on here for the reflection. We just want it to have a little bit of color to match our background. Alright, so what I'm doing now is I've made a copy of our couple, and right now I want one layer where it's literally just the couple and the boat on a separate layer, and that's going to be on top, because what I want to do is kind of paint away some of the water underneath, and I don't want to affect the people, and this is the easiest way to do it. So let's make sure that the one with the water is at the bottom, and we're going to go to that layer mask, and this way we're going to use a soft round brush and then just ever so slightly just kind of erase some of this water so we can bring back some of those images underneath for that reflection. And this way it's also not going to reflect it's not going to interfere with our couple as well, since we have that duplicate copy on top. So we're just going to do this a little bit here, and this to me was the easiest way I could keep those reflections of our background while also maintaining all of the water and then that look as well. And I also just kind of playing around with some of these floor images, make sure that the perspective looks good on there. And we'll tweak this side up just a little bit as well, something like this. Yeah, sometimes you just gotta play around with it and just kind of get it to your liking. It can be a little bit finicky at sometimes, but you know, that's the nature of compositing and creating these images. And we can just blend that into a little bit. But this is looking really good, guys. And we're just gonna finish this up in just a couple more seconds, and then we'll move on with adding some wall texture here. Alright, so let's go ahead and bring in our first texture, and we're gonna do what we did with the background wall. So we're gonna create a selection of this, press Command C to copy that, and then we wanna go up to filter and then go down to vanishing point. Make sure that we have this on a new layer, and then we're gonna create a plane just like what we did before. And once we have that in place, press Command V to go ahead and paste this in, and then let's just slide this down so that way we can get it right into perspective. Just like so, and let's hit OK. And then we want to just play with these blend modes a little bit and see what works in our favor. So maybe soft light will stick with that, but it is a bit faded. So I want to add a levels adjustment on top of this and create that contrast. And we're going to take this slider, move it to the right, and then even this right one, we'll just nudge this to the left a little bit. Yeah, that looks nice. Okay, so from here, we're gonna highlight both of these two layers, right click, and we're gonna convert this to a smart object so we have it by itself. Go back into soft light, and then to enhance this effect, we're gonna make a copy of that, and then we can paint some of this back just to scale back a little bit so it's not too overbearing. And that's gonna be the gist of it. All right, so we're gonna do the same thing with the right side, but this time I'm just gonna put this in manually, and then we're just going to follow those same steps just like what we did before to create this texture. Okay, and this is going to be the second texture that we're going to use. And what I want to do first is just desaturate this. So we're going to come up here, slide that all the way to the left, and then we can add a levels on top of that. And let's just maybe brighten this up just a little bit so we can bring some of those whiter parts back in. All right, so a lot of times when I do textures, I just like to do multiple at a time there. And for this one, we're going to go down, same thing, just play with these blend modes, just see what works best for us. And we'll stick with the soft light again. It seems to work pretty well for us. And in fact, you know what? I'm going to go back to the blend modes here, and I'm going to change this from soft light to multiply or darken. Now we'll stick with multiply, and then let's just go to the opacity, scale this down a little bit. And since we did the left side, let's do the right side now. And this is the final result of that, and we can just kind of touch up some of this area as well. But there you go. Our walls are starting to look more like walls now and not so much a realistic background image. Alright, so I'm going to take a couple more seconds with this. Let's just tidy this up and clean it up just a little bit more before we move on. But all in all, I think it is coming together quite nice. Let's see how this looks from afar. Yeah. Alright, so let's work on this ceiling now. So we're going to bring in another texture. And for this, instead of completely desaturating this, we're actually just going to take the hue slider, slide this to the left so we have more of the blue tones to match the sky. And then we can just desaturate this just a little bit so it's not overbearing. So just something like this. Maybe we'll bring up that saturation again. And then I want to throw levels on top. And I do this because I want to exaggerate the different cracks and the crevices on this texture to make that stand out. And we've merged all this together, and we're just going to place this in the right perspective for us here. And so if you just control or command click on these little anchor points or these little nodes here, that'll help distort this perspective. And it's just, you know, finding the right fit for you. And I think we're going to put this into multiply blend mode. And I know it's a bit much right now, but that's okay. We're going to add this hue and saturation adjustment layer and desaturate this a little bit. But obviously we are going to just play around with this. So we're starting with this blend if and bringing back some of the lighter points from underneath. So that's going to help us out. We're going to add a levels underneath as well to just brighten things up a little bit so it's not too dark for us. Alright, so even still, we're just going to lower the opacity, and that is going to help us out. But if you notice though, our sky and the walls are a little bit different blue. So what I'm doing here is adding a color balance adjustment layer to the walls and just bringing back some of the cyans, make it look a bit more saturated so it is a bit more consistent from our walls coming to our ceiling. We want to make that a nice transition. So that's all I'm doing right now with this color balance adjustment layer. Alright, and right now all I'm doing here is just using a soft round brush and painting black on this layer mask so we can bring back some of the original sky to this layer here and have that come through. Okay. Alright, so it's still a bit too blue for me, so with the hue and saturation adjustment layer, all I'm doing is just desaturating a little bit of that, dragging that to our original background layer, and then make sure that that is only affecting our ceiling. But like I said, it was just a bit too much for me, so I just wanted to scale that back a little bit. And at this point, what we can go ahead and do is just start to tidy up some of these corners. And I am speeding through this process because it's a little bit tedious. But essentially, you know, we're now wanting to take this outdoor landscape and try to make it look like we have walls in place. So if you look around in your room, or just when any wall connects with another wall and it's adjacent, you do have that little bit of the changing of light. So that's what we're doing here. And I'm going to spend a little bit more time with this. I'm not going to talk through the whole thing. I'll just let you kind of see my process. But I will be back with you in just a second once we are finished and wrapped up with this. So just one moment, I'll be back. Alright, so there we go. We've added in all of those different shading elements here. And now we can come back here and just tweak some of this up a little bit. I want to go back to the ground group layer here. And we're going to add a levels adjustment on top of this. I just want to brighten this up. It's, you know, we're outside. It's an outdoor setting, so it's got to be a little bit brighter. So that's all we're doing here. Alright, so let's just go ahead and check out the before and after on that real quick. And then we're going to lower the opacity of the shading on top of the ceiling here as well. Great. Alright, so let's add some more textures. Who doesn't like more textures, right? So this is just going to help us create, you know, just make it more believable and just give it some more character to our walls. So I just wanted to add this fun little cracking texture to the walls. We're going to make a couple of copies of these, and we're just going to slide these out at different parts to work with some of these different damaged areas. So something like this. We'll shrink this one down here, put this in the corner. Okay. Let's tidy this up. We're gonna just get rid of a lot of this edge here because we don't need it, but you can see that we have this really dark blue and it doesn't mix well with our background. We have a very light white and a very light blue. So with this selective color adjustment layer, right now I'm just kind of targeting with the light blue in mind, just kind of the upper half of this texture. So we just want to find this, make sure we kind of get it to the similar hue as that very faded light blue wall texture is already in place. So we just want to match that. And then on top of this, we're going to add a hue and saturation adjustment layer, and this will be for the bottom. So let's desaturate this. And now I'm just focused on the white part of this. We can increase the lightness. And let's just see how that looks. We can invert that, and let's just paint this back in. Something like this. And I can already see that it's a bit too dark, so we're going to have to come back in here and increase the lightness. So let's just tidy this up a little bit more. And let's come back into this layer. We'll brighten that up. There we go, that looks a bit more seamless. Alright, so now we can really do some damage here and blend this in much better. So let's just get rid of this, and you're going to see here in just a second, as we zoom out of this, it's going to look much more seamless and it's going to look really consistent. You're not going to have that blue ring. See? Yeah, it looks really good from far away. Alright, let's touch up the middle portion of that because I kind of like the original color. So let's just see what we can do here. I might do a little bit of both, but right now we're just bringing back some of the original color to this and the lighting levels as well. And maybe we'll just bring back some of the white. I think we're going to do a nice little medium balance, a little bit of the original color, but bringing back some of the white as well. But when we're doing this, I can tell as well that we're starting to lose some of the dark colors of the cracks, so I want to paint this back in to make sure that we're preserving the dark corners here, because that's really going to sell this cracking effect. So we don't want to lose that. We want to keep the integrity of that there. Okay, very cool. So as you remember, we do have the other portions of this on the wall that we need to take care of. So let's just skip over that because you already just saw me do that with this one. So let's just take a quick peek and see how that looks. Okay. And then next, we're going to bring in another texture on the right side. I don't want to walk through the whole thing again because it's literally the exact same thing. But I just kind of want to put this in place to kind of give you an idea of what we're working with. And so what we're going to do here, just like before, let's skip over this. I'm also going to add a little bit more of our original grungy texture to the walls too. So let's take a peek and see what this looks like now with all of those adjustments. Okay. So yeah, we're giving our walls a little bit of character and a little bit of variety. In this next section here, I'm not going to really break this down because really all it is just taking a bunch of 3D assets that I got from Envato Elements and just kind of making this scene a little bit more believable. As I was putting this image in my head together, I'm just thinking, obviously, you know, what other elements can I add in a pond or lake setting? So I just thought these little water lilies would be a nice little touch. So we're just quickly adding a little bit of variety. I had a few different images to work with, and we're just kind of flipping them around and just seeing what works nice, what doesn't work nice. But anyways, let me take a few more seconds with this. I'm going to finish putting everything in place, and then we can move on. Okay friends, pretty much everything's in place. At this point we just need to take all of these elements together, blend them, make it look like they all come from the same environment, and we're starting off with the water lilies. I'm adding the color balance adjustment layer, and I'm just warming them up a little bit. I like the look of all of the foliage in the background, so I just want to bring that in and make it the same with our water lilies. So for right now we're working with one group, and then we can just make a copy of that and then clip that onto our other group as well, so that way they both have the same colors to them. Alright, and then next we can work with the swan. We're going to add a, sorry, not color balance, but a curves adjustment layer here. And we're going to play around with some of the different channels. Let's start with our blue channel. And I just want to decrease some of this in the midtones. And as I'm doing this, you can see some of the green is starting to come out as well. So we're going to play around with that channel too. So just for right now, just the blues. Let's just see how this looks. All right, not too bad. Let's switch over to the green channel and same thing. Let's just pull this down a little bit. And that's looking more kind of the way I have envisioned here. And I think that's looking a bit more accurate. So even still on top of this, what we're going to add on top of all of this is we're going to add a hue and saturation adjustment layer. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. And we'll clip that on there below, and let's just desaturate this. We're not going to pull the anchor all the way to the left, but just kind of somewhere in between medium and then all the way to the left. And then I want to preserve the color on the beak, so let's make sure that we paint that and bring some of that back in. So I'm switching to a soft round brush, and we can just paint black just on the front of the head there, so I can bring back some of that color. Okay. Alright, so our swan is looking quite nice, and we can move on from here. So let's collapse that. And then from here, we're going to go to our couple layer. We're adding an exposure adjustment layer, pretty much bringing this all the way to the left because we want to start working on the shadows. So someone right here, Command I to invert that, and now we can paint white and just bring some of this back in. Obviously, we're going to work with some of the water lilies here and underneath by the swan, but then by the boat. Let's bring that because there is going to be that shadow casted from the boat. And even on the walls a little bit, we can touch some of that up too. But like I said, we are pretty much in the final stretch here, so we're just kind of doing all the little things to make this look nice. So let's spend a few more seconds with this, and then we can continue on to our next little step before we wrap this up. Alright, so now that we've just done our shadows, we're going to tackle the highlights now. So we're adding an exposure adjustment layer. This time we're just moving that slider to the opposite end, inverting the mask, and we're just going to paint this back in a little bit on the water lilies and on our swan. We don't have to do too much on the swan because the swan's looking pretty good right now. Just a little area here and there. And now we can take this and add this onto our couple in the boat and do some work on them. The lighting source is already, accurate as terms of where I want it to be, so we're just kind of essentially just exaggerating it just a little bit more, just making it pop and stand out a little bit more than what we had before. And as we're doing this, you can even see on our lady here that the hair is a little rough around the edges, so that's actually going to be the next thing that we're going to tackle here. Let's just kind of see how this looks from afar, and we can see the before and after on that. Just minor details, but it looks pretty good. Alright, so let's add a couple of new layers here, and we're gonna start working on the hair. And what I do with the hair is I'm using a very tiny brush tip. And all I'm doing is just sampling multiple colors and hues of her hair strands, and I have a few different layers to work with, and I'm just going over this. You can see that as we cut it out, there's all the dark edges. So I just want to kind of brush along the same curvilinear shape and the flow of her hair as is right now, and we're just trying to patch things up a little bit. We're not doing too much. We just want to take care of essentially some of these darker portions and extending some, maybe add some flyaway hairs. We can do the same thing with the guy as well. And I'm speeding through this, as you can see. When this is your project, just take a few, quite a bit more time on this to make this look nice, but I just kind of want to show you a general idea of how I address this issue. And from far away, you can see just adding that, it looks really good. We don't need to do too much with it because they are not zoomed in. Alright, so just a couple more things that we're going to do here before we go to the camera raw filter. I'm going to add a new layer at the top, or just behind our couple. And I want to switch to a very light faded yellow or orangish tone, and we're just going to create a little bit of light just to give the impression we have some sunlight coming in from off the canvas on the right side. So just something right about here. And we can always scale this back just a little bit, but for right now I just want to add just a little bit of light. Okay. Alright, so that looks pretty good. And then let's go ahead and we'll just label this real quick, our sunlight. And then we're going to go to another layer on top of our couple and just add a little pop of light on top of them as well. For this one, we can just turn down the opacity ever so slightly on that. And then I want to touch up the lady real quick. So I want to go back to essentially our original layer. We're going to add an exposure adjustment layer. And I just want to increase this. Pay no attention to the whole boat here. It's just going to be her that's going to get affected by this. We're going to invert this mask. And then just kind of along parts of the arm and the shoulder, I just want to bring in a little bit more light and exaggerate this just a bit more than what we originally have. But all that looks good. We're going to get a new layer at the top, merge it together and convert it to a smart object. Then we want to go to filter and go to camera raw filter. And then let's do some final touch-ups and then we can call it a wrap. Alright, so just some basic things like increasing the contrast. I'll darken the shadows a little bit, and then we can even pull up the vibrance ever so slightly here. We're not doing too much with this. I'll increase the sharpening and the masking, and we can come into the color mixer tab and just maybe experiment with some of the colors here. See if we want to maybe switch the blues to something more cyan. But yeah, sometimes I just come in here and just see maybe if I like something. But I do want to desaturate the blues just a little bit for the sake of the ceiling, and then shift our yellows to more of the orangish tones. Perfect. Alright, so we'll come into the color grading tab. Again, I'm not going to do too much because I actually really like the look of how it is. Just very subtle adjustments, and then we can wrap things up with some grain and a little bit of a soft vignette as well. So let's hit OK. And here we have our final product with that. And so this was actually a piece that I just wanted to spend quite a bit more time on and just polishing up a little bit more for myself. But due to the sake of, how much more work needs to come in here, I didn't want to put this on the video. But here is my final composition with this effect. But you can see here I added some more foliage to the water, added another swan butterfly, changed up the flowers just a little bit, as well as the texture on the wall, and spent some more time with a little bit of the color correction and highlights, things like that. Just really take my time with this to be a little bit more nitpicky. But overall, I hope you like those adjustments, and I hope you enjoyed this video and maybe learned a thing or two from this. I hope to have another video, hopefully not too long in between this and the next one, but we shall see. In the meantime, friends, I hope you stay safe, and I will see you back here with the next video at Blended Graphics. Take care.